Okay.
So welcome everybody. This is the final session at the ELK 2022 conference on Friday afternoon. And with me today, thankfully, is Cynthia Calongne from Parker University, CCCOnline, and Colorado Tech University. She's going to be speaking about education in the metaverse, reflections on the art and the possible. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you for that warm greeting. And hello, ELK. Hey, it's our last conference session. What a wonderful conference. I want to thank the organizers, and I want to thank each of you who have made the discussion on Discord so lively and exciting. Wonderful. Mahalo, which means thank you. Okay, we're going to talk about education in the metaverse, and I want you to be thinking of what it means to you. I don't want you to think about what the hype tells you. I don't want you to think about what the media tells you, or what big business tells you, or even what Meta Facebook tells you. I want to know what it means to education. Now, I want to do a shout out to Kay and Chris. This is from their poster at ELK, and I couldn't resist doing a whimsical, this is the Weeping Angels exhibit. And if you have not seen it, they have marvelous videos and wonderful content. It will be on display through April 23rd, and I'll let them give you the slurl for it, but I am logged in. I can give that to you at the end of the session as well. And I'm of course having a little fun. The Weeping Angels is from Doctor Who, and it's all about a threat that comes at you when you look away from it. So while you're looking at it, all is well, but if you look away, it'll get you. Now, this is our agenda, and I am going to talk about the metaverse. I'm going to talk about social presence, in case you're wondering, why does this matter? Who would do this sort of thing? Doesn't it seem like a lot of work, right? And then, of course, I want to share with you, what is it like to not only work in virtual worlds, but to design a VR app for the Oculus Quest 2. What insights have we discovered so far? Because we have one in beta testing. And then what is our recommendation for education? And when I say that, I don't mean my recommendation. I want to know what you want. We are the drivers of technology. We are the folks who shape our future directions. And I don't know about you, but I want tools that make it easy for my students to create, not just me. Okay, so, and then there's the dark side. I included this for Kay, Chris, and those of you who are very concerned, about not just equity and inclusiveness, but also all the directions we're heading in, how we think about privacy, confidentiality, keeping the internet weird, all of these things. This is a shout out also to Blue Barker Low Tide, who was there at the conference and who gave me one of the terms that I'm going to use today to characterize one of the things I value in the metaverse. Thank you, Kay. I'm sleep deprived after, my 4th day of conference. So, so if my tongue twists, that is why. Our subtitle and our brand for our little app is called Find Your Ikigai. And so we'll talk about that. This is my bio, and we're not going to read it. The slides are available on our Discord for you. You can get the full slides or just the PDF, but essentially I do a lot of talking about this subject and I do a lot of thinking about it, but this doesn't mean that I know everything about it. There's so many new tools, techniques, and perspectives that my brain is just on fire, right? I do try to get involved in lots of different groups, so I'm aware of what's going on and can touch the folks who are doing great things. So I want to thank you for that. We'll just take a moment. Kay always teases me about number crunching, right? But I like to know, why would anyone do this, and where's the world going? And so if we look in the very center circle, if we think about 2020, the pandemic, everyone's at home, right? 48% of the world's population conducted some social media every day, and if you think about that, you're like, oh, and of course, and Mosen's credited for it, but these statistics come from Statista, in case you're wondering. 91% of the people using it were using mobile devices. So this makes us think about, in the future, how would we want our VR technology to work, and what kind of equipment would we want to use? Do we always want to be bounded by the past, or where do we want to go with this? And how will we accommodate more people? If we talk about being inclusive, that includes their technology, right? Then if I thought about who was on the web, what they were using, Google, 89 billion, transactions and, or queries, right? Searches. And then of course, YouTube, 34 billion, videos being watched. And then of course, Facebook. Now, Facebook is on the decline. That's something to be realizing. It's so early in the process, you may not realize it, but in 2020, they had a 68% share of that social media. And they noticed it's declining. It's been declining for years now, which is one of the reasons they are so interested in immersive social presence and ways to connect people in meaningful, deeply rooted ways, right? Beyond text, beyond video, beyond memes. Okay. XR, that's extended reality, and that terminology is embracing augmented reality, which is everything from your QR codes to, of course, all the amazing augmented reality tools. It includes mixed reality. So if you're on Windows, right? If you use Windows 10, 11, then you have a free tool on there called the 3D viewer that when you bring it up, you can have little augmented reality animated things dancing around your head, doing stuff, etc., which is cool. But what's even more so is that you can grab for free from Sketchfab or any of these other services 3D content, bring it down, add content to it and create these highly immersive, engaging learning activities for your users, for your students, for the people around you. I say users because I think of faculty too, right? I think of curriculum design too. I think of staff and everyone who feeds our spirit on the campus. Everyone's included. So if you think of 150 million different users in the US, all using extended reality in 2021, well, if there are 325 million of us, that's almost half, not quite. We have infants, we have young people who haven't done that. But so we start thinking about that and we think, okay, where's this going? Why would we get involved with this? Should we be paying attention? We certainly are on the forefront of being interested in new engaging ways to learn. Now, I hung virtual worlds separate from that because I don't think they included us. We're often the afterthought. And so we're going to think about that too. And then we're going to think about the US GDP only for a moment. This is for Chris. Maybe he doesn't care, but I noticed that they said we were like 49 billion or something last year, and they're projecting 120 billion in the future. And while, economics may not matter to you, if we think about sustainability, someone somewhere has to pay the bills, right? So we need the benefit of all this technology, but we need someone to be getting everyone to participate. So on the World Wide Web in 2021, we had 4.9 billion internet users. This is growing, and it's growing through mobile technology. So we have to keep a look at all of this as we think about where we're going. Now, this is a web comic. I don't know who drew it, but Mal Burns and Thurza Ember, who run the Hypergrid Safari, shared it with me years ago. And my copy is dull, you know how it is. Uh-oh. Chris wants us to link our cryptocurrency wallet right now. Well, no. So we have this shared presence. That's what matters to me in 3D worlds. And my personal definition, and I will state this up front, and then you tell me if I build enough of a case for it. My personal definition is that the metaverse is the 3D web. If we had to describe it in 5 words or less. I know Chris is going, what about cryptocurrencies? What about non-fungible tokens? What about, I said, all those things matter, but they are not the thing that characterized it over the last 30 years, okay? And so I show you a little bit about worlds that over time have sprouted up and have thought about the proof of concept. Some of you have been in these worlds. I've attended your talks, 2005, 2007. For active worlds, that was one of the first big for education, where students could get in there. They're building. It's very similar to Second Life, not as many affordances, in the tool, the interface, and of course you'd have to bring in your own objects, your own construction tools, but and you also had to pay per seat per student, so that was a little limiting for some of us. When Second Life opened, that was haptic interface testing software. That means they were testing devices like this to see how they vibrate, how they give you this sense of realism and force feedback. This was not software for a virtual world. This was repurposed and put online to become a virtual world, but that's not where it started. So if we think of the origins of all these tools, how they have evolved and how we use them, right, for education, that's important to us. Now, there was very popular with quite a few educators, but my problem with it was when you created content, you had to get approval from a board and you had to wait a few weeks. And I want my students to be able to create content and to visualize their grand concepts from the class and simulate them in some way that provides an experience that matters, that gives them a takeaway that is their own. It's not just a job portfolio. It's like a stepping stone to their future. That's what I want. Okay, so I don't want much, do I? And I tell them this, which always, causes them to rear back for a moment, like a vampire is just launched. But all of this is possible. And let me explain the comic. Um, the commercial worlds were first, and of course they're showing SL in the upper left corner. In the right corner, you're noticing lots of, well, maybe we go down first. See, I tend to be a Western culture, left to right, down, but I'm looking at the number of plants here. In any event, in the upper right corner, many more worlds. And on the next slide, I'll show you how many more. It was 200 more worlds, okay? And when I say worlds, I mean totally separate software offerings where you had to have an account, log in, etc. And so lots of them, an explosion of this stuff. And even more, and some of them grew very popular, some of them declined a little bit. You'll notice in the lower right, you see Second Life's a lot smaller potatoes by comparison to all the others. And that is important here, not because they have declined, because they have a lot of growth, reemergence, if you will, but the fact that we're all thinking of new ways to do this, right? It's our world. And so the hypergrid gives us this ability to put in a URL and a port number, colon port number, and visit worlds that have similar software where we do not have an account, where we are not authenticated. That's just like the web, the 2D web, where I take my browser and I go visit any web page that will have me, right? Whereas in the 3D web, I'm looking at the chat, I saw some chat come up. In the 3D web, we haven't always enjoyed that, but we have since Dr. Krista Lopez made this possible, right? She's Diva Cantro, and she created this. Her family lives in Portugal. She teaches for the University of Southern California at Irvine, and she runs a couple of businesses thinking about smart cities and thinking about climate and energy and how to shape a positive future. So she's busy in so many places, and she said, I need to have better meetings, and I need to be able to gesture, drag content to someone's body. I need to see emotion. I need to have this rich experience, and I need to do it while moving and creating, creating content and being active. And so she created this technology where we can take the things that matter to us and pack them in our suitcase folders, take them to other worlds, use them, share them, give them, and acquire new stuff, create new stuff, collaborate with others, and then bring it back home to our home server. And we manage the digital rights and all the different concerns that we have for these things. Now we need people like Chris who's saying cryptocurrencies, blockchain. And the reason we do is I just told you we're leaving a port number open, right? So we have security issues. So there's all kinds of issues with all the affordances, and we want to think about these. All of them matter to us. But anyway, for those of you new to the term metaverse, it was first coined in the book Snow Crash, and I have it there at the bottom. So this is the 30th year, right? This is not a new word. That's important to realize because a lot of businesses are trying to appropriate it, right? And I don't mind if they want to appropriate it as long as they're paying the bills and making it possible for me to do great work. I know that's offensive to some, my apologies. But let's face it, I don't have enough money to pay for everything. I need people, everyone in the world to help. And their vested interest is just fine with me if I can put a positive spin on everything we do and help shape a bright future. And so that's my interest. So we had a conference 2 weeks ago too. This April is conference month, okay? And on the right, I'm showing you a few statistics from a little talk I did for the Association of Information Technology Professionals, because they were interested in virtual worlds in 2009 and in VR and on all these technologies. And so I looked at what was out there, and I looked at a lot of different studies, and there were lots of different worlds. 59 of them had microtransactions, which are not cryptocurrencies necessarily, but instead a commerce system, right? You convert dollars into whatever currency they're using. And so those are things to think about. So it's not new, and that's one of our greeting areas at the other conference. Well, some of you I know during COVID felt disenfranchised by not only just being at home, but being in Zoom, where I know everyone says Hollywood Squares, right? We're all in our little cubicles, we're gesturing, doing things, but we don't really touch one another, right? So in 2020, my research group, which is called Virtual Harmony, we had formed in 2008, and uh, my research partner and I went to high school and college together, lost track of each other for 29 years. And then he called me up after I published an article in the EDUCAUSE Review in 2008, around that time frame, and said, hey, come join the team. And so I've been working with them every week ever since. But in 2020, we needed something to feed our spirit. So we started creating spaces that were soothing and inspiring and full of creative fire. We weren't just thinking about the mission to Mars and all the practical stuff we do, right? Solving big problems or integrating artificial intelligence and machine learning, all that stuff. And one of the folks in our group, her son graduated from college, but he was denied his graduation. So we said, well, we can do better than driving around the neighborhood, in a car. Let's get together and let's have a celebration. And we created a 10 cabin yacht. When I say yay, I mean my research partner did the work. And of course, we logged in, we went sailing, we went scuba diving. We had this amazing experience, which helped to energize us. Keeping ourselves energized is one of my first thoughts in the metaverse is all this technology is wonderful, but it has to feed our spirit too. It all flows out from us. So there's this notion of presence and social presence that I want you to think about. Part of my definition includes that I have to have an awareness of others that extends beyond logging into a tool and seeing that people are online in a list. That's not enough for me. Even talking to them is not enough for me. So I need things like virtual physioception and virtual intersubjective presencing. Now, the first term was coined by my research partner, Dr. Andrew Stricker. And this research was featured in Barbara Truman's research. How many of you remember Barbara Truman from one of our ELK keynotes a few years back? She was right before Michael Hernandez's keynote in Breckenridge. Unfortunately, she passed away July 22nd, but we carry her with us, and her aloha spirit is always part of us. So you're going to see a lot of her work featured here. But I want to point out something from 2007 that really impressed me and inspired me to continue this work. After I gave a talk at EDUCAUSE, a National Science Foundation vice president in charge of their website, which is a big deal, right, came up to me and he said, why would I ever need this? He says, I just redid all the websites at the NSF. I would never want to expend the money and energy to do these things. Why do I need this? And a lady from Princeton was walking by, a professor, and she started laughing and she says, because it's the intersection of people and content that matters. Our awareness of each other, the joy, the laughter, the emotion, that social emotional learning. She says, you can't really get that by just looking at text and inspiring long requests for proposals. You need something more. And of course he looked a little puzzled. Until you have the experience, you don't know what I mean. Well, I have definitions for you, but we're not going to read them. These slides are available for you. Let me give you the short version. My short version is the first term refers to how you represent yourself, how I know you exist. I'm looking at your smiling face, Wong, and I know you exist. I know the others exist because I know them so well, right? But and I see the text, I see the joy coming through. Virtual intersubjective presencing is about your shared presence. What do you share with others? What are you willing to share? Your constellation of identities. If you think about that, your human self-consciousness. I used to love movies. This is going to shock you. I like Johnny Mnemonic, not for all the gruesomeness, but for the notion that after I'm gone, that some part of me will still exist, that my consciousness and presence and impact on the world will somehow still be there, right? So I love that notion. And of course, I was speaking on digital storytelling. I knew I was going to get emotional at this point. So here's a little bit of humor. I don't really create memes too often, but I was doing one for the nonprofit Commons about writing, and especially for my doctoral students who write, right? And of course, for my students in every field at every school. And the top one, I created a dance ball. We were all dancing, and someone kicked off some particles. And I said, how magical. This is what my friends think I do. And then, of course, I'm dancing with family members and friends at an elfin event. I said, this is what my family thinks I do because they're standing there with me. And then, and then, of course, my students created the sick bay. They used free textures from the LCARS database and created this in Second Life. And of course, they bought the alien. He was a few cents. And they're like, what the world thinks I do, these glamorous but secretive, scary dark side things, right? And then, of course, my publisher wishes I would write faster because I get so busy talking, I don't always get words on paper. I'm part of NaNoWriMo every year and I win, but it's a bad scramble at the end, right? So here I am wearing a red shirt in a Star Trek uniform. Yes, I'm appropriating Star Trek because I grew up with it, okay? I am a Trekkie. And I'm there with my alien friends, okay? And then, of course, I've come from Virtual Harmony. We wear astronaut outfits when we're doing various things to get into the mindset of what we're doing. And I opened up my visor and put on my Oculus just to be silly, right? The Rift DK2. And and I was at the last event for the Hypergrid Safari, where they go out and explore educational sites every 2 weeks. They have reinstated it this year, which is a blessing because there are so many amazing spaces out there that you're just not aware of. If our exposure to the web and to the tools, our universe is relatively small, and being able to branch out and experience other things all around the world is absolutely breathtaking. So I'm standing there on the beach thinking about that. And then what I actually do is teach. But you will notice, I don't think about diversity too often. I know I should. And the reason I don't though is most of my students are not humanoid, okay? And I don't, and I respect all their differences. The light bulb called me after 5, 6 years after class just the other night, and I was so gratified to hear from him. And of course the robot, I'm working for him now. He's now my dean. But back then he was my doctoral student. This was like 2012, 2013. But it's this notion that we have this connectedness where we're inspiring our students to greatness. And these technologies help to empower them. You're welcome to use my silly image or create your own from it. So, what characterizes the metaverse? For me, I think of the long tradition of the World Wide Web, going from text, and you have to realize I was on ARPANET before the internet opened. I ran a bulletin board system for 150 callers, Mac callers, out of my home from 85 to 87, thanks to my family setting it up. We networked 2 floors of our home. But that wasn't natural to do that back then. I've been computing for over 47 years. I started on punch cards on a Fortran system, and I remember the first PCs that came out. So I take the long view about this. To me, this isn't just reading about history. This is living it, okay? Yeah. And so I love browser-based apps. Web 2.0 really transformed my life, but I love streaming media. I gave up on my cable except for gigabit connections, right? And then, of course, I love all the things we do. But I think of that as the 2D web. It's wonderful, but I don't have a strong shared presence with everyone when I visit their sites, when I consume their media. They're not always aware of me. I'm reminded of the movie Out of Africa. At the end, when Isaac Denson, from the book to the movie, is saying, will Africa remember me? Will the land quiver with the color that I have worn? Will the children make up a song of which my name is a part of it? What what impression are we leaving in our world, and how are we inspiring others with it? So I think about the 3D web, and I've made a far greater impact here. Um, I create, I share, and I share lavishly, not because I don't care about selling. I know I should care about money because it's nice to eat, right? And eating is good, but I am blessed with wonderful people who give me jobs and, and help me be fed and insured and the things that sustain me so that I can do all this amazing stuff. So each one of them is a part of my success. And my success is due to them. So we have this reciprocity that I'm thankful for. All of these technologies, if you do any of these things, you are participating in the 3D web. And to me, that is the metaverse. Okay. Now, the cryptocurrencies, the security, the blockchain, the sustainability issues, all of those are going to be critical to its infrastructure and success. So I do not discount them. I don't push them away, but I say you didn't invent it. You are now participants, and we welcome you, right? Everyone's welcome in our metaverse. But there we are. Now tell me in the text chat, make sure you share what your vision of the metaverse is, because maybe mine's not all inclusive. Maybe I'm missing someone here, right? So let me show you some examples. Now I'm going to overwhelm you only for a moment, and then we're going to get to the fun stuff. I am going to show you how we compare our virtual world designs, how they look in VR, okay? But the thing that's interesting here is right here in the center. It's this metaverse open simulator. 6 years ago, we were talking about it. 12 years ago, we were talking about it. We've been talking about it for a long time. At this point, we were thinking about the military who go off all over the world and are disconnected. And we were thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we could create on Raspberry Pis little pocket worlds that they took with them? So even when they're in the field and don't have internet access, they had a place not just for training and simulation, but for some sense of community, which meant we had to have bots, right? We had to have something they could talk to and work with, and et cetera. But we also wanted them to hypergrid into the main campus, into the main grid, right? So they could connect, share ideas, and have that social presence and community. Because without that connection, we're all disconnected. It's art, and it's interesting, but it lacks that certain magic that I need. So here on this slide, we're showing a lot of the open source technologies and of course the APIs, our ability to connect via the web, to various databases, record stores, how we collect analytics, how we use our machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? Our systems learn from the users, just the opposite, right, of education. And of course, so we collect data from them when we're thinking there might be discoveries here, similar to Foldit, discovering, in 2 to 3 weeks, how to solve the HIV AIDS protease, right? How gamers solve that. Maybe we could learn to solve something very complex, like how would we breathe on Mars? How would we travel safely? How would we think through all of the human needs? How could we collect all that kind of data and crowdsource it? And how could we involve people from all different kinds of backgrounds? They don't have to be scientists. They don't have to be educators. They don't have to have college degrees. Everyone participates. And so we're really thinking about that. And then we have an AI system that tries to classify and, against an ontology and various ways. We're using a lot of open source tools. We're very self-aware about our architecture. So that way other people can benefit from it. Well, that's the short of what we do. So let's get to the fun stuff, right? So here's Sakurajima in Open Simulator at Virtual Harmony. It is one of 18 worlds or grids that we've created, which means they're not regions. We have to hypergrid between them. The reason we do that is we're running everything on a Mac server with 32 gigabytes of RAM in a farmhouse in Alabama, right? We're self-hosting with a dedicated line, which took a hit over the last 2 weeks. We've had 2 tornadoes strike Andy Stricker's farmhouse, and it took out the dedicated line. It took out some trees. His poor wife had to sleep in a bathtub for both events, because that was the only safe space. So now they're putting in an underground shelter and we have a better line. But we moved everything to the cloud, right? Because that was just way too catastrophic, for humans. And of course, we don't want a single point of failure for our tech. The humans come first. So first we're putting in the underground shelter, and then we worry about the rest. But this, and we're not appropriating their culture. I have to put in the disclaimer. Francisco Yanakura, the best friend and colleague of Barbara Truman at University of Central Florida, was born in Japan, and she never got a chance to live there. And she hears the stories from her family, and she wanted to get in touch with her roots, and she wanted to think about her ima and her various wishes for the world. And as we were going through COVID, so we created, yeah. So yeah, it's the notion of we're grassroots. We have no funding. That's the next important part of the story here. While Andy is with Air University and gets funding for the things he does for work, we're doing all of this for the joy and proof of concept for education, our gift to education. So we have Sakurajima, and this gave her a place to create. We created all of this, and then a place to reflect and meet during COVID, to heal ourselves. And then also to think about what would we want to take forward. And so we decided to use this as the source for our Oculus VR app. Okay. This is Thanksgiving 2021. Instead of having the traditional one we've had in the past, we have a virtual turkey and the whole 9 yards. We had lobster and crab, and we dressed in kimonos. That's me against the windows with Andy Stricker, Spinoza Cornell, and Algernon Loire is his wife there on the left, and her sister. They're the Hart sisters, and is there Lynn Skylark, and we're enjoying it. Poor Frankie couldn't enjoy it with us. She was with her family, which is important, but we were all here celebrating without her. So we took these scenes, and this is a busy scene. I want you to explain to you that Andy is a philosopher, a programmer, a cognitive psychologist, someone who taught quantum mechanics and intelligent agents at Oxford, okay? For Donald Broadbent, who coined the term selective attention in cognitive psychology. Donald Broadbent worked with Alan Turing. These are not young people, but Andy and I are of the same age. We're both going 65 next month. So we're under Medicare bombardment, And he thinks about Walden pathways and philosophy and the things he values. And he thought about the Romantic period. The period, how many of you ever read the book Little Women by Louisa May Alcott? I loved it. I grew up with it. I know this dates me, but it's this notion of Joe's boys and creativity and crossing over boundaries, doing all these things. Her father was an advocate for education for everyone and voting rights for women and many issues that today we take for granted, right? And so we think about that Romantic period and all the things people wanted during it. And we found parallels to it, to the Japanese concept of ikigai. And so we're going to share those parallels quite briefly. But here's our mesh content from the open sim world, and we took it into the virtual world. Now, he put on all of us got an Oculus for Christmas, okay? That's what started this. Because they went down to $299, and I can afford $299. That's hitting my price point. And then we started developing and designing and thinking. And so he hooked, if you're running it, you can hook into your PC. So you can be in the virtual world while you're in the VR world and be thinking about integrating your content between the two of them. That's what we're illustrating here. So that's him and Sakurajima. It's not that pink, by the way. He is put on like sunrise with a pink kind of feel. And that was the takeaway from TCC they had for me is they go, tea houses aren't that pink, right? And I says, I'm not that pink either. If anyone ever sees me, I'm wearing black, it goes with everything. So here's our early effort. And the early effort, he brings in the mesh, he starts thinking about things. And his first discovery was, did you know the Oculus Quest 2 app is an Android app? How many of you knew that? How many of you knew that was Android? Yeah. It's a self-contained computer on your face. So you're not hooking it into anything. So you wouldn't know, because you can bring up your iOS app and create the account that activates it. And once you've done that, you're done, then you're just using that device. So everything is self-contained. That's the first thing. So remember all those mobile users we were talking about? Mobile phones tend to cost more than my Oculus did, for a really good smartphone, right? Obviously, we can get less expensive ones, but it's not easy. And so while we start thinking about that, can we make phone calls with that? Can we watch movies with that? What all can we do with that? And how do we feel? if we do it for very long. So here he's creating a little sound object. And yes, it's crude. It looks like Second Life, doesn't it? It looks like we took a box and we put some buttons on it, some little boxes, a little slider, and then of course we scripted them and put them in this world. Yeah, that's what we did. So some of the same patterns you have in virtual worlds we're using in the VR world. And that's the first thing to think about. Now he loves these background slides. To me, they're a little busy. I have to look away. This is more me. I started creating at the same time, well, in mid-March, our our conference poster as a tribute to our VR app and to our Sakurajima world. And so this is me creating it in the upper one at sunrise. That's a sunrise view. And then at midnight at the bottom view. And of course, I put the tea house above because we only had 24 cubic meters, right? Got to use that space. And down below, I created a little garden, to remind myself of the things that matter. I have been indoors since March 2020. So this is my window to the world. And I know I could go outside, but when I do, there's a fire. I can't breathe. I'm allergic to everything on the planet, grass, trees, life. And so, so this really feeds my spirit. And this is my little garden. That's me creating it and thinking about it. And everyone's floating in space. So it's a little bizarre to do this Japanese build, in a virtual world. And the Ikigai principles that we have in our VR app, there are 5 of them. The first one is to start small. And I created the things around us, but I did not create the bench or the chair or these flowers. They were created by a woman who with electric sheep called Koreeda, who she's amazing. And I met her when I first started Second Life. I started in December 2005, but I really got to talk to her in April 2006 when she created, as part of Electric Sheep, the New Media Consortium's campus. And if you don't know who they were, they created the Horizon Report and generated it every year up until a few years ago. EDUCAUSE continues the effort as their partner. So I have a connectedness to my past. That's what this means to me. And I love that. Everything I created, I gave away. I obviously didn't create those things, but I want to learn how to make those. And that's going to be my quest for the next year. Here I'm showing you how magical everything is. How many of you ever saw the movie Practical Magic? I better watch the time, right? You ever see the movie with Sandra Bullock? Well, and Nicole Kidman. Well, in this little book, she's telling how she felt, how it inspired her and made her feel magical, made her feel powerful, made her feel connected to things that, from a simple life, the things you value, your love of family, etc. And so I find joy in the little things. I'm pulling together all the elements that matter to me, and it just fed my spirit. I feel like I'm energized for the year. I created those little shoji doors, which are little, I used a Star Trek like script on them, but instead of making a whooshing sound, they only go one at a time, and they can stay open in case you want to add them to your house and have your door open and welcoming of others. And then I'm sitting here talking to Beth Ghost Raven, who's had such a strong influence. Her nickname on the web is Book Lady, right? And so she's sitting here as the little rabbit with this gorgeous hat on, talking to me. We're having some tea and we're thinking about connecting with others and nature in harmonious ways. Well, I'm showing you all this to give you a precursor to our VR app. So this is the last one. Be present in the here and now. That people have to remind me of this because I get so excited. I want to do 5,000 things, right? And I need to focus on here and now as well. Well, here's our app. And of course, I've just told you it involves all of these different elements. Now, Blue Barker gave me the terminology. I'd never used the term social emotional learning, and I looked it up, the fundamentals of it and foundations. And of course, some on Wikipedia, they say it's a controversial thing. And I'm like, emotions should be part of what we do, and part of our learning experience. And so here's the opening. When you first create a VR app, and the first version he'd created, I showed you some early scenes of it, that was single player. Our first thought is we wanted multiplayer. So we wanted, and you're right to put it there because I'm looking. Yeah, see, I think SEL is important. I was surprised to hear that some feel it's very controversial and we shouldn't, emotions should be stopped in our lifetime. Oh, what a notion, right? But in any event, we gather here. And so you can have this multiplayer where your party forms and they go into the experience together. This is one of the first differences between virtual worlds. We don't have to show up together, and form as a party together. We do in games, right? We do in World of Warcraft, which of course are part of the metaverse, but we don't necessarily in virtual worlds. People can show up in different and join in and find their people and very seamlessly. So we take these things for granted, how effortlessly we gather. And so that was one of our first things. We had to put some games in here, and he had a checkerboard and some other stuff. I loved it. I picked up the checkers and all, but everyone else wanted something different. So he created a crystals game and a stacking game. And here's the second thing. When you're in VR and you pick up an object, if we have designed it such, you can pick it up, manipulate it, do other things with it. It's not like a scripted object in a virtual world where you click it or left click to activate, right click to edit, and then a script occurs that limits your capability. In this case, I can pick it up, I can bounce it on my head, I can do various things, I could drop it, I could put it up correctly, whatever. And so we have all these objects you pick up that give you control over your world. We also thought through mobility. There's a rock climbing, there's a 5 courses you go through, and then you win a capstone course. So we have various challenges while you're enjoying nature, while you're finding your ikigai, right? And while you're interacting with all our content. Uh, I took a header playing table tennis in VR, the game 11. I used to be a table tennis champ with second for nationals. I won 49 tournaments. And so I'm playing along and I'm having such a good time. And I forgot there's no table there. And I reached for a long shot, and I was cutting with a little English and bam, I took a dive. And so from then on, I've been sitting while I use my VR. Unless it's Beat Saber or something for physical fitness, I feel a little more comfortable seated. And that's been a blessing, really, because now I'm getting the experience of accessibility. And how do I climb that rock climbing wall when I'm seated on the couch or in a chair? So I have to think through all of those. Yep. And so we're testing that. And of course, I have also thought through when you have a crowded office, as I do, how do you set that guardian barrier? And then you can reach through the barrier to see the room around you. So it works like an augmented reality device when you extend your arm outside your circular barrier. That's important to understand because uh, that helps me to feel more comfortable and to feel centered and to be able to connect with others around my body, right? The physical, and also to not hurt myself. This is part of the capstone just to show you what it looks like. Now, we learned something from this on compression algorithms and the fact that, mobile devices for performance, you have to have a very small footprint when it comes to your file sizes and stuff. And mesh can be extraordinarily large. So we had to think about that. I better move along a little faster. We also created hands. So you wouldn't be seeing controllers, right? You would instead be seeing your hands. And at first we created these robotic hands with the joints. Now that may seem a little weird, but I like the joints because then I could get a sense of the animation of the bones, okay? But then I'm a designer, right? I like to think about that. But Oculus came out with an upgrade, and they come up with upgrades quite often, and now they look flesh colored. The problem is we had created our own hands and solved that problem. So now the flesh ones are here and ours are like ghost hands, so we have to mesh the two and remove ours from the code. And so these are things you think about when you're creating these. You think, well, how will I have to adapt my creation to fit the current version, right? And that user experience. So we think about that. That's why he's using puzzle pieces to think about how we piece it together. We like to use high fidelity models. We like to go, while it may look cartoony, we're trying to go for a degree of realism, authenticity in how things look and act and behave, right? We also think about motion sickness. Every one of us will at some point or another feel a little bit of queasiness, especially if we haven't eaten or if we're moving a lot or moving discordantly or we haven't spotted. You know how dancers spot on a wall when they spin? No dancer on this planet goes around spinning all the time without spotting, right? Without doing something that anchors you. In my early VR work from 95 through 97, when I was designing interfaces and evaluating whether anyone could use the technology without training, help, or manuals, I was thinking about these kinds of problems and how to make people comfortable. So I used a free use session where I took them to an arcade. And my apologies to those of you who prefer peaceful simulations. I had them shooting ducks. They weren't real ducks. They were canvas-like ducks that made obnoxious sounds. Quack, 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 quack. And the first few times is charming. The 100th time and you want them dead. So they would look down the barrel of the gun. They had 4 degrees of freedom, which means you're XYZ, and then they have this ability to move the gun up and around, kind of the walk, propelling yourself forward. And that helped tune their inner ear. Now, I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going to go there, but I'm going to tell you it helps to center and get people comfortable. And then later they could jump in the dryer and go spinning around, woohoo, or whatever crazy experience you wanted to have and not feel as uncomfortable. So comfort matters. And of course, we need to think about that in how we approach the technology and how we use it with our learners, right? And then the entry is a little difficult. I'm going to show you a little of that too. I know I have to wrap here soon. This is Alcove. It's a commercial product. We started using this to think, well, we could have business meetings in here. A lot of people are using Mozilla Hubs and other things. What would it be like in VR? Well, it could look like your living room, and you can watch movies in it. You can share video. You can exchange content, etc. On the right, I love that view of the water. That really feeds my spirit. But I don't spend a lot of time in these kinds of places because I'm a creator, right? So here's what creation looks like. This is the Unity interface, and this is a canned world, something like from Alcove. If you were selecting and customizing your space, you have a lot of objects you can configure and put in here, and you're just kind of clicking and moving things and scheduling this, etc. And there's some wonderful videos on YouTube on how to create apps. They cover it in like an hour or two using these technologies. They even give you tips on how to customize the interface for your workflow and how to make it support you. So here we're thinking about, well, maybe people need a different way to navigate. Maybe that'll help with motion sickness. So we have a technique that several apps use. It's I call it hippity hoppity. Wherever that circle is, you can click and land there. I find it a little discordant for moving quickly through a simulation. But gliding, if you move too fast, I use the left controller, and when you press this little, the joystick button, you can glide very smoothly. I feel like Morticia and the Addams Family gliding along on my roots, right? and you glide uphill and you glide over the hills and you explore around, and it's just wonderful. And yes, I am very pop culture. I'm a lot like Constance Steinbeck. But what about the dark side? I promised to talk about it. So I was thinking about Kay and Chris and how they try to keep us honest and also weird, right? Keep the internet weird by thinking about these things. Well, if you go to their exhibit, which is open through April 23rd, so is mine, you can get this hat for free. And I know it's a little weird, but it has beautiful animals on it, and it's part of the safari there. They have 2 hats. One you win by listing 12 animals that you see, and the other from just clicking an object. But and I give you the link here, and that's all in the slides. So this is what my exhibit looked like a few years ago. I am weird. This is my idea of the ideal garden too on Mars. What I would build if we went to Mars and vegetation looked different. I see beauty in all these things. I know they may seem creepy to you, but I did grow up with the Addams Family, okay, and with Star Trek and with all these things. And I did this. We had translators here. We had 2 Elvish translators from Tolkien's languages. His a brilliant work in language. We had the Na'vi language translator. We had Klingon, the Klingon dictionary. Got to have a little everything. So there's pieces of myself in all of these builds. And I was thinking about this, and I thought, where are we going for the future? What do we want in these tools? Well, I would need the power of creation. In Second Life and OpenSim and all these tools, we can do prim-based creation quite quickly. So I can teach students a dozen different very cool tasks to go from start to finish in creating simulations, animating them, texturing them, making them come to life, and then learning to load their own server and run and host their own world. When we give that power to our learners, we have given them the ability to continue learning and to shape the future. And so that's really my gift. Now, if you go to my poster, click on the gifts, and it's going to give you about 2 to 3 dozen things that you see around my body. And from the second story too. So we shape the future, each one of us, and every one of you are creative. Boy, Kim, Kay, you've done so much, in all your builds. And of course, this Japanese build that I did here, I think is a takeoff on something you did years ago at the same conference. And so I was thinking about that. I want to do a shout out to my team at Virtual Harmony. They sustain my spirit and keep us moving. They do much of the hard work. I'm the one who goes around and says, well, that needs to be full permission so we can share. I don't criticize the colors and all the other stuff because I want this marketplace of ideas and an appeal to everyone. I'd love to know your insights about this, about the metaverse, and what you want to see in these tools possible. I do give you some links to my stats and stuff, and a couple things I featured, and Barbara's slides that digest her dissertation. Certainly read her dissertation if you ever get a chance. It's a glorious effort. So this is my closing thought. This is from the Practical Magic book, and the way I'm very thankful to all of you for this opportunity to speak. For Kay and Chris for inviting me to share. And please realize each one of you shapes the metaverse. Each one of you defines it. I am a general semanticist. That means I'm a follower of non-Aristotelian systems. I don't believe in extremes. I'm in the shades of gray where everyone is defining our language, our tools, and shaping it. And everyone's a participant as well as a user, as well as a creator, and inspiring others. You may not physically make things, but creation comes from ideas and from sharing them well. Okay, your thoughts. Hey, thank you. I am painfully shy. Those of you who know me know this is my 334th presentation, but I can only do it because of you. Thanks.
Actually, Cynthia is the nicest person I have ever met. And unfortunately, I sometimes measure myself against her and I go like, I'm such a mean person. Okay. But
we're role players.
Yes. Okay. What I wanted to say really quickly, and this is coming over from the Metaverse tour too, and I kind of we could kind of organize this a little bit here. What about us doing a fantasy fair night as a virtual tour one of the Saturdays while Fantasy Fair is open?
Yeah, we could. Absolutely. And Fantasy Fair, by the way, is like April 28th or so through May 8th. Yes. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I can go to your site. I'm in the world, by the way.
Okay.
I'm almost always in the world.
Our site is very minimalistic. I can tell everybody. And it was right. and Weeping Angels, okay, is not only Doctor Who, but the CIA. Okay, what was reported through WikiLeaks was that the CIA was had a project called Weeping Angel, and what it was to turn on your Samsung TV and watch you.
Yep.
So yes, this is this is our big declaration of independence of cyberspace, and we have some weeping. Yeah, go ahead.
I just
show the world
the view so you see 1,000 meters. Okay, so we're seeing like 3 to 6 sims worth of content, and the Weeping Angels here is just brilliant against this backdrop. I was so inspired by it. That's me standing there posing for our cover, right? with this angel. If any of you familiar with the story know that if you look away, the angel consumes you, and you lose your future. You become lost in the past, and you pretty much die. You get your own gravestone, but so it's a bad thing, right?
Yeah. Weeping Angels aren't a good thing, and those also have audio. So when audio's on,
that's right.
The angel talks to you when you get within a certain proximity of it.
That's right.
But
This is these are conference posters or exhibits at the conference where you guys presented some amazing sessions, and we want to invite you to come out and try it out and get free stuff and look at all the videos she has down here. If I click them, they'll all try to
yeah,
play,
they'll all
but
start. So you have to be there. But the big thing about this being weeping angel, you walk through the screen.
that's
just,
right.
just the same way that the CIA had planned to go and,
That's
and
right.
to look through people's screens. So
How to fix the internet. Yep. And I'm looking at it with sunrise just so you can see better. So please realize in these worlds, you get to experience it your way. You get to decide what your lighting is like, how close you get to objects and think about them, the power of creation, everything you do. That's a very powerful thought. Anyway, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Elk.
Cynthia, thank you so much for this.
Absolutely.
Thank you for so much for ending us on not like the human future. While it's technology, it's still the human future of education. And I just want to say, for me, whenever I think about, we have our students looking at PDFs and HTML pages and LMSs, and I go, they could be here. I cry a little inside. Okay. Just so you know.
Oh, same here. By the way, those of you who knew Barbara Truman, here she is dancing at last year's conference in blue. I put her on my rug and gave her out to everyone, so she would always be with us. And here's some of the talks we just did, only different versions of them. I gave all those out too on viewers. And anyway, all of this stuff's available for you on both floors. You just click the gifts. And the theme was Phoenix Rising, which is why the fire's there. Thanks, everyone.